Santa Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories.
Hare Bol.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we will continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the third canto. This is the 11th chapter, and today's verse is number 17. Bhagavan Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nanu Vishvam Vichakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha Bhagavan Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nanu Vishvam Vichakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha Bhagavan Vedakalasya Gatin Bhagavato Nanu Vishvam Vichakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha. Please chant.
Bhagavan Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nano Viswam Vichakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Bhagavan Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nanu Vishwam Vichakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha.
Hare Krishna. Bhagavan Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nanu Vishbham Chakshate Dhira Yoga Radhena Chakshusha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Bhagavana Veda Kalasya Gatim Bhagavato Nanu Vishwam Vijashate Dhira Yogaradhina Chakshusha. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Bhagavan, O spiritually powerful one. Veda, you know, Kalasya, of the eternal time. Gatim, movements. Bhagavataha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nanu, as a matter of course. Vishvam, the whole universe. Vichakshate, see. Dhiraha, those who are self-realized. Yoga Radhena, by dint of mystic vision. Chakshusha, by the eyes. Translation by Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O spiritually powerful one, you can understand the movements of eternal time, which is the controlling form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because you are a self-realized person, you can see everything by the power of mystic vision. Purport. Those who have reached the highest perfectional stage of mystic power and can see everything in the past, present, and future are called Trikalayas. Similarly, the devotees of the Lord can see everything clearly that is in the revealed scriptures. The devotees of Lord Sri Krishna can very easily understand the science of Krishna, as well as the situation of the material and spiritual creations without difficulty. Devotees do not have to endeavor for any yoga siddhi or perfection in mystic powers. They are competent to understand everything by the grace of the Lord, who is sitting in everyone's heart. Translation again. O spiritually powerful one, you can understand the movements of eternal time, which is the controlling form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because you are a self-realized person, you can see everything by the power of mystic vision. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nirvishesha Shunyavari Paschati Deshtare Om Agnana Timirandasha Garanjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmaya Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Trubhyas Chakrapa Sindubhya Eva Chapatitaram Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So in this chapter, we've been talking about calculating time from the atom. Maitreya is explaining this to Vidura, how we can calculate these different increments of time starting from an atom. And so now Vidura, after hearing about different durations of time derived from the atom, he's now asking, or yesterday's verse, he asked about the duration of life for the living entities who are beyond the range of a kalpa, which is 1,000 cycles of yuga. There's the 4 yugas. Those cycle through 1,000 times, which is also 1 day of Brahma. So now he wants to know, okay, how does time work there for those who, live for such a long time compared to those down here. So today's verse is Vidura speaking to Maitreya, and he's qualifying the question that he just asked with the reason why he knows that Maitreya can answer it properly, right? So he knows that he's going to get a proper answer, not because he went to some prestigious university where, they dissect how time works and all these things, but because he is in connection with the Supreme Lord. So he knows, okay, anything that's going to come out of his mouth is going to be accurate because he's only going to speak what he knows as was revealed by Krishna, right? He's not going to make anything up on his own. Since he is spiritually powerful, and the word used there is Bhagavan, and he repeats the revealed truths presented by the Supreme Lord, the word used there was Bhagavataha. So since he's spiritually powerful and he's just repeating these revealed truths that were presented by the Supreme Lord, he is capable of understanding and explaining these subject matters, right? This is Vidura's reason for speaking this verse. So he has all confidence that basically whatever he asks Maitreya, because of his connection with the Supreme Lord, because he knows he's not going to make any sort of adjustments or anything like that, that he can trust anything any topic that's going to be explained by Maitreya. Because any topic can be explained in a very Krishna conscious way, because everything is part of Krishna, right? Everything in this material world is just Brahman, right? When we see it as separate from Krishna, that's when it becomes the illusion. But if we can see things as they actually are and use them accordingly, then we too can have this sort of transcendental vision. So a verse from Bhagavad Gita comes to mind here when I read today's verse, and that is Bhagavad Gita 2:46. Oops. I just did something with my screen. I did something else again. Sorry. Okay. So Bhagavad Gita 2:46. There we are. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. And Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to that verse in Bhagavad Gita, the rituals and sacrifices mentioned in the Karmakanda division of Vedic literature are meant to encourage gradual development of self-realization. And the purpose of self-realization is clearly stated in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita 15:15. The purpose of studying the Vedas is to know Lord Krishna, the primeval cause of everything. Vedaischa sarvam ahameva vedyo. So, self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with him. The relationship of the living entities with Krishna is also mentioned in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 7. The living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna. Therefore, revival of Krishna consciousness by the individual living entity is the highest perfectional stage of Vedic knowledge. So the idea is that we have to become, I was going to say good, but we have to become expert at distinguishing between what we think we know and what we actually know, right? Also known as distinguishing illusion from reality, right? So what we think we know is all the stuff that we have accumulated over the years that has been verified by our imperfect senses, our faulty sense of reason, from unauthorized teachers, whether in the school system or outside, misplaced faith, putting faith in someone who we thought was an authority, but actually they're talking nonsense, and so on. So people have this saying, right? And they say, we have reason to believe, right? They start out by saying that, but their reasons are flawed, right? Because it's coming from imperfect senses, faulty reasoning, unauthorized teachers, or misplaced faith, or all of the above, or any mixture. So they have reason to believe, but their reasoning is flawed. So what they believe isn't actually true. It's not knowledge. So even though they accept what they believe as an irrevocable fact, it's not actual knowledge, right? So that's what we think we know. Now, what we actually know, what we actually can know, is anything that we have learned from the revealed scriptures, and we have very carefully understood it through the instructions of an authorized representative of Krishna. Now, that last part's very important, because otherwise this gets very tricky, right? Because sometimes, we can even say often, we can say oftentimes, people have a very deep faith in scripture, but they misunderstand it, misapply it, and create all sorts of huge problems, very big problems, right? So-called holy wars. Now, there is such thing as an actual holy war, of course, but the ones in our recent history, we would call those so-called holy wars, where each side thinks that God is on their side, right? And it's not actually a war to determine or to serve God. It's just a war to have control over territory or resources or even thought, control over everyone's thought. Again, not sanctioned. So so-called holy wars, bigotry, exploitation, injustice, all of these things can come from people that have deep faith in scriptures but don't actually understand it. So the last part of my previous statement is of dire importance, right? These instructions, which are given in Shastra, must be understood under the proper guidance of an authorized representative of Krishna. There can't be any interpretation, no material motivation, no tinge of desire, even for liberation, right? It has to be constant and it has to be consistent, right? Unmotivated, uninterrupted, right? Pure. Not tinged with karma, fruit of activity, not tinged with any sort of intellectual whim, etc. And as always, this comes down to whether we are considering ourselves the center or whether we're considering Krishna as the center, right? Whether we're being self-centric, which is what we do here in this material world. We view the world through our own eyes and we make all of our decisions based on our own experiences, right? Or God-centric, where we see, we know that actually, no, Krishna is the center of everything. And instead of making our decisions based on what we think we know, our experiences, we base our decisions on what we actually know, what's given in revealed scriptures. And so we act accordingly, right? This is the goal, and this is what we gradually come to. So this is always the determining factor, whether we have put ourselves in the center or whether we have Krishna in the center. And just like the purport to Bhagavad Gita 247, which we just read, as it mentioned, the purpose of studying the Vedas is to know Lord Krishna, the primeval cause of everything. So self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with him. So if we truly understand our actual eternal relationship with Krishna as a servant, then we can understand absolutely everything. It's as simple as that. That pure connection to Krishna allows the revelation of everything, right? So if we have a proper connection to Krishna, a proper relationship, and we understand it and we act according to that relationship, since Krishna is everything, we have access to everything. But as soon as we start trying to rely on our own skills or experiences, things like that, outside of what is revealed in the scriptures, coming from a bona fide source, then we don't have access to everything. We have access to however much we're actually in line with the Supreme Lord. That's how much access we have. So this is why Vidura is confident that Maitreya can answer his question with authority, because he knows Maitreya is only going to speak what has been revealed to him, right? And of course, this concept, it's a continuation of the lessons that we're learning from Lord Brahma, right? We just went through what Lord Brahma had to go through. And the lessons we learn there is that we can't rely on our own senses or intellectual prowess to perform our duties, right? We have to understand who we are in relation to the Supreme Lord and act in such a way as directed by the revealed scriptures from the instructions of the Guru or from Krishna in the heart, that the truth can be revealed to us through our unflinching faith and determination to please the Supreme Lord, right? That's the way we have to act so that these truths can actually be revealed to us. Why? Because we have unflinching faith and the determination to please the Supreme Lord. So for Brahma, it was tapasya. He had to perform tapasya. For us, actually, same thing. It's tapasya. It's not the exact same thing. The detail of our tapasya, it will depend on our unique circumstance, right? We don't have the qualification that Brahma had, and we don't have the duty that Brahma had. But we do have unique qualifications and unique duties. And so the principle is the same for everyone. We have to understand who we are in relation to Krishna, what we're dealing with. That means what our current conditioning is, what we're working with, or you can say where we're situated on the map, right? Because the Vedas gives us a map, right? So that's instructions on how to get from wherever we are to wherever we want to be, which is back in the favorable service of Krishna. And then, of course, yeah, how to get from. So first, we have to understand where we are. What's the relationship there? Where we want to go, and then how to get there, right? And this is what the Vedas teaches us. This is what is revealed to us from the scriptures. And of course, if we actually want to reach this goal, we have to use these authorized tools instead of our obviously flawed senses, intellectual prowess, and so on. Then and only then can we act in true knowledge and leave the illusion behind. I want to read a quote. I actually just found this recently because it's in a conversation. It's a room conversation, April 22nd, 1976. It was in Melbourne, Australia, or I should say Melbourne. And there was a fellow named Brian Singer at the time. There was a whole room full of people, but this fellow named Brian Singer was asking Srila Prabhupada questions. So in this conversation, Srila Prabhupada says, if you create your own plans, then you'll be unhappy. This is the whole instruction. Sarva dharman prityaja mamekam saranam vraja. You give up your own plans, nonsense plan. You take my plan. You'll be happy. This is the whole process of Bhagavad Gita. You take Krishna's plan and you'll be happy. And then this Brian Singer says, and you avoid disappointment, because he was worried that, if we give up everything that we think we know, abandoning all varieties of religion, just surrendering it to Krishna, we might be disappointed because we're also, in theory, abandoning something that's important. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, there will be no disappointment. And as if you make your own plan, you will be baffled and you will be disappointed that it's going on, right? So the idea is that this disappointment that we're so afraid of in surrendering to Krishna, that actually goes away, but it can't go away if we don't do that, right? The disappointment is always going to be there. We'll always be baffled if we make our own plan. So, of course, this is being repeated throughout the Shastra, but when I came across this, I just thought, oh, okay, it's nice to see it in these different words, these very direct words, explaining it to someone who's not really familiar with the philosophy, just breaking it down. This is the philosophy. You do things according to your own plan, you're going to be baffled, you're going to be disappointed, you're not going to be happy. As soon as you abandon all of that and just surrender to Krishna, you give up your plan, you accept Krishna's plan, everything will go fine. All right. So it's only when our every activity, our every word, our every thought are all engaged favorably in Krishna's service as directed by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then we can achieve true success, right? Otherwise, there may be some temporary successes, material successes, which don't count for much because, as we've just understood how time works for us and how time works for other living entities, even a little bit of success in a blink of an eye is basically, essentially, comparatively nothing, right? Not even worth considering. So the amount of effort that we put in, material effort, to get some temporary material solution, it may seem like it's worth it at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, the only true success that we can get is to understand the Shastra from an authorized person, apply it properly, and engage in Krishna service favorably. So any other thoughts? So it has to all be engaged favorably, Krishna service, as described in the revealed scriptures. Any other thought, word, or action is destined for failure. Just as Srila Prabhupada mentioned in this conversation. So the connection, it has to be made, and it has to be made properly. I'm going to give an example of how sometimes we can hear a good instruction and follow or try to follow that instruction, but not get a favorable result. So a friend of mine, I'm not going to mention their name. I don't think anyone knows him in here. But a friend of mine one day was cooking. And so he had 3 different pots on the stove. Pardon me. Sorry. So he had 3 different pots on the stove. And like many people, all of the burners were on high. I never understood this. Some people, when they cook, they always have to have the thing on high. They think it's going to get done quicker or something. Things boil over, they burn, they get cooked unevenly. But anyway, some people, this is what they do. You crank it up to high. So anyway, he had 3 pots on the stove, all cranked up to high. He was boiling some vegetables, boiling some pasta, and I forget what was in the 3rd pot. It may have been sauce. And so he had them all on high, and he put the lids on all of them, and then he put a wooden spoon on the top of each lid. The lid, there's like the lid, and then there's like a little knob, the handle that you pick up. And so on top of that, he had a wooden spoon laying across it. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. And so I asked him, hey, what's with the spoon? Is that just, how, because sometimes the stove, they have like a little, it sort of looks like a big shallow spoon, right? And that's where you put whatever you're stirring, you could put it down without getting the stove dirty. You put it down in one of these things. I don't know what they're called, but they exist. Or sometimes people just put a paper towel down and they put the spoon. So I thought, is this just where you put your spoon? That way, after you stir it, it doesn't make a mess? And he said, no. I read that if you put a wooden spoon across the top of the pot, it won't boil over. Right. And so those of us who understand what that instruction actually meant, it means without the lid on, if you have a wooden spoon going across, when the whatever liquid, it could be milk, it could be water, when it starts to bubble up, when those bubbles hit this wooden spoon, the surface tension breaks and it diffuses. So instead of continuing to rise and boil over, I mean, eventually it can still boil over some, but it's not as bad as if there's nothing on top. So the idea is the lid can't be there in order for this to work, right? If the lid's there, then the spoon is serving no purpose at all whatsoever. It's not doing a thing, right? But he heard an instruction. He followed that instruction to the best of his ability, but everything still boiled over for obvious reasons, right? And then he thought, you know what? Sometimes people give instructions like on the internet, and they're just trying to mess with people. They're just trying to see if they're stupid enough to do that. And that wasn't really the case. The case was that it was an actual instruction that actually works, but it was just not applied properly. And it was an honest misunderstanding. The spoon was on top of the pot, but there was a lid in between, and that totally defeats the entire purpose of breaking that surface tension. So sometimes we think we know, right? we're even intelligent enough to seek advice from authorities. But if we misapply it, it still isn't going to work. This is why it's very important to not only seek this advice of the Shastra from authorities, but to actually understand it. And for this, we have these various tests, right? The scriptures give us various signs of what it will look like if we are actually applying Shastra properly, right? All these different qualities will appear. Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-12 says that all of the good qualities of the devatas automatically become manifest in one who is engaging in devotional service. And there are various other statements in the scriptures that will let us understand if, okay, am I actually doing this properly? Am I engaging in this properly? Like Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, towards the end, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. So when we get to this position, we're no longer hankering for things that we don't have. We're no longer lamenting for things that we once had but no longer do. We're just completely satisfied. Pardon. We're just completely satisfied in our spiritual positioning, knowing who we are, who Krishna is, what our relationship is, and completely satisfied in just acting according to those revealed instructions, knowing that this is actually knowledge, right? That this can go somewhere. So we have to be conscious, right? We have to put our faith in the right place, and we have to actually do our part to follow through, right? To follow through properly and make sure that we are following through properly. And when we're not following through properly, when we notice that something's not working, we have to make the correct necessary adjustments, right? So sometimes we'll misapply an instruction. We'll see that it didn't go the way that we thought. So then we have to understand, okay, well, either just Krishna didn't will it, or I did something wrong. I wasn't applying it right. So we have to use our intelligence. So the Shastra's there, but that's what the Guru and Sadhu were there for. When we misapply something that we've got from a bona fide source, the Guru and the Sadhus are there to explain, oh, okay, yeah, no, it was intelligent that you approached the Shastra and tried to apply that in this situation. However, in this particular situation, there are a few points that need to be understood in order to properly actually apply the principle there, right? So that's why the system is created the way that it is. So all of this is accomplished by understanding the Shastra under the bona fide authority of a spiritual master and applying it to our lives. And gradually, eventually, Shastra has to become our exclusive source of knowledge, right? So we have to put less faith in what we think we know and complete faith eventually in what we can actually know, what is given in revealed scriptures. But as to today's verse points out, we don't have to be afraid or anxious or nervous, right? Sometimes people think, okay, but if I only study the scripture, I'll become dull. I won't be, I won't know how matter works anymore. I won't know how to function in society, right? Some people think like that. If someone is only focused on a spiritual life, then all of a sudden, they can't function in normal society anymore. But as today's verse and purport point out, there's no reason to have that anxiety, because along with knowledge of spiritual topics comes also how matter works, right? Because matter is a transformation of spirit. It's actually, matter is the transformation that happens to spirit when we see it in the wrong way. So if we start seeing it in the right way, we're actually able to function in society better, more effectively, right? So on the contrary of what we're worried about, that we won't be able to relate to the people anymore. It actually helps us navigate through the confusing maze of this material world. And I'm not just talking things, situations too. When we understand what is given in the revealed scriptures, we can actually see why things are happening the way they are, why they need to happen the way they are at the particular time. And we can actually navigate through those things without becoming caught up in them, without being tied up in them, without being bound by those particular things, right? So the Shastra will actually reveal to us how to function in society properly in such a way that we're not becoming entangled in it, right? So the idea is that we don't become overcome by the dualities of material happiness and distress. And again, we won't hanker for things that we don't have. We won't lament for things that we once had but lost. We'll just be completely satisfied in our original position, right? So understanding Shastra means that we can understand our unique conditioning and solve the puzzle of this confusing existence, right? So we're not all Brahma. None of us are, actually. We don't have this very important duty to perform of creation and expansion, right? But we are part and parcel of Krishna, and we do have a unique duty. We have both our Sanatan Dharma, our eternal duty, as every living entity does, but we also have our conditioned nature, right? And we can't shuffle that off prematurely. We can try. We're not going to be successful because what has to change is the consciousness. And if we can't address that, if we can't actually understand it deeply enough to actually apply it to our consciousness, then when we prematurely just try to get rid of it, the Palgul Vairagya, we actually realize how attached we are to it, how attached we are to our conditioned nature. So the idea is that, okay, this is my conditioned nature, and this is how I gradually purify it. And that's what the process is. We gradually purify our conditioned nature so that it has less of a hold on us, so that we can dismiss the things that we think we know and accept exclusively the things that we can actually know, the things that are given and revealed in the scripture. So that's what understanding Shastra means, that we can understand our unique conditioning and we can solve that puzzle. All right. And this is what Vidura's statement to Maitreya means for us, right? We are to seek out the instructions of those who have understood the Shastra and can guide us out of this material world, no matter what topic we're discussing, right? This case, we're talking about how time works, right? And so not only are we to seek the instructions from these authorized sources, but we are also to become author ourselves. We're also to become authorized representatives of the Shastra so that we can help others bring their lives in line with Krishna's service. And so that's what we learned from today's verse and purport. Would anyone like to add anything, or are there any questions or comments?
Hey, Christian Prabhu. It's Vrindavaneshwari. I love your class I love the example of the wooden spoon that you gave. It really, it was such a brilliant way to illustrate how good instruction can go wrong when it's misunderstood and becomes completely useless or it can, sometimes it can even be harmful, in the sense of some other things. And it just really got me thinking about how when we hear the instruction from Srila Prabhupada, or when we hear through the parampara, we are getting the correct instruction, but what is the mood that we're hearing it in? And so, how is that, that can completely change how we interpret that instruction. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there and get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's super important. When we first encountered Krishna consciousness, we were all very enthusiastic. We read what we read, and then we said what we said. And a lot of what we said didn't actually apply to whatever situation we were addressing, right? This happens when neophytes get overly enthusiastic about something. And so we have to be careful about how we're presenting these instructions. We have to understand what the actual principle is and make sure we are serving that principle with what we are saying. So one example that I give often in this regard is so in the science of self-realization, which is a compilation of different conversations and stuff like that, there's one particular conversation that when I first met the devotees, my friends and I were very excited and enthusiastic about this particular conversation. And this is a conversation that Srila Prabhupada had with Cardinal Danielou. And Srila Prabhupada relentlessly went after Cardinal Danielou because he was a meat eater. And although Cardinal Danielou was trying to show the things that his philosophy and Srila Prabhupada's philosophy had in common, Srila Prabhupada just kept on this point. No, but you're telling them it's okay to eat meat, and this is not okay. You can't understand God this way. So, and my friends and I, we sort of did the same thing to basically anyone we met, right? We just relentlessly harbored on this point. You cannot understand God if you don't, right? But we didn't understand that there's context there. Srila Prabhupada didn't do that to everyone, right? He didn't say, he wasn't that adamant about that point with everyone that he was talking to. It would come up from time to time. But the reason why he was adamant with Cardinal Danielou about that point is because Cardinal Danielou is a cardinal, right? People are following him. He has influence over people who are considering themselves to be religious. And him allowing all of his followers to do that, that's not just doing the wrong thing yourself. That's leading a whole bunch of people into a big problem. So it's not that everyone we meet, we talk to them like Srila Prabhupada spoke to Cardinal Danielou. A lot of times that ends up being counterproductive, right? Because people are just like, what, why is this person, they're not responsible for that many people. So they can be talked to in a very different way. And we see that Srila Prabhupada did that. So we have to understand these things. We have to understand that, yes, everything that's mentioned in Shastra is absolutely true. But we have to understand what the principle behind all of those things are. And when we're speaking them to others, we have to make sure that that principle is being served and it's not being counterproductive. We also have to understand and observe whether the instruction is being taken properly or being taken out of context, right? So if someone, so if we quote from Shastra and someone says, oh, so, and then they say something that's not quite right, then we have to make sure that we can clarify that, right? Make sure that under the circumstances, it can be applied properly. So just like going back to that story about the wooden spoon on the pot, my friend's conclusion, like I said, was that, oh, sometimes people on the internet just mess with people to see if they'll, So in other words, he dismissed that good advice. There was good advice given. He tried it, He didn't try it the right way. It didn't work. So then he just lost faith in that entire that particular authority, right? And then he's wary of things that he finds on the internet from now on. Oh, maybe this isn't, again, somebody trying to mess with. And of course, sometimes that happens on the internet these days. Sometimes people are just trying to mess with each other. But sometimes we just misapply some good advice. So we have to understand, we have to be intelligent enough to understand whether or not this good advice is actually coming from the authorized source, and then how we are to actually properly apply that, and when, if necessary, to make adjustments. And those adjustments always should be made, again, with the guidance of the Shastra, through the Guru's instructions, the Sadhu's examples, etc. So to try to put all that in a short answer, I'm sorry, my answers are always long, or my responses are always long. To try to sort of sum that up, if we understand the principle of Krishna consciousness, which is to bring people closer to understanding their relationship with Krishna and acting accordingly, if we understand that principle, then and we keep that principle in mind in everything we say, right? Not just repeating whatever we read in scripture on a particular topic, but actually understanding how it applies to their particular situation and how it can help them recognize or understand their eternal relationship with Krishna and act accordingly. We keep all of that in mind when we give our delivery, then we can't lose, because even if they still misunderstand it, that's on them then, right? We do our best. We're not in control. We're not the controller, right? So we do our best to explain Shastra in a way that people will be able to understand their eternal relationship with Krishna and act accordingly. That's all we can do. But we have to do it in the best way that we can, right? Did that work?
Yeah, that was great, and I think it was interesting you brought up the discussion with the cardinal, because that's always, you know, that the conversation always kind of struck me as strong, and you know, I always wondered why he was kind of harping on that, because there are overlaps and similarities, and you know, so I was always wondering, because in other conversations he would not have done that, so.
Oh.
So thank you for explaining that. You actually clarified a big kind of question in my mind of like, why was he just harping on this cardinal? Like, what was his aim? And to hear that, yeah, he's a leader, so he was helping him understand the importance of the full scope of compassion and you know, not meat eating and things like that, to help him really fully expand his viewpoint on leading his people. So that's very enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, because otherwise, if we're focusing on what we have in common, then we just feel good about the mistakes that we're making. We don't feel any need to change. But if we address that, and again, it doesn't get addressed with the followers necessarily, but you do address it with the leader, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why that was relentless. So yeah, so you know, my friends and I, we were misapplying those good instructions, right? And we were turning people away.
Yeah.
They were having a very bad taste of the so-called Vaishnavas, right? And rightfully so, because we weren't doing it right. We were enthusiastic, we were repeating the Shastra, but we didn't understand the principle.
Not in the right mood. Yeah. No, thank you, Prabhu.
We have to understand the mood. Yeah, so sometimes it's actually good when we're reading one of these conversations or something like that, and it strikes us as kind of odd, like, oh wow, this could have gone a different way. Well, I'm wondering why it didn't. There's a really good reason always. The acharyas don't make those sort of mistakes. And even sometimes we'll see in these conversations where someone will say something, and because of the whatever, maybe we're perceiving it as a language barrier or something, Srila Prabhupada seems to answer a different question. But no, he's actually answering the actual question, because it's always about whether one is being Krishna conscious or not. And so sometimes we're thinking, oh, you know, Well, if it were me, like, oh, here's a great example. Anytime someone's giving a class, right? We're listening to the class and we're thinking, okay, what would I say in this situation? And then when the class is over, we sort of ask a question to try to, get this person to say what we think we would say in this particular class, right? This is a common thing that happens. But that's not always what needs to be said at that particular time. It's something that can be said, right? It's valid, but it's not the only takeaway, right? So we have to understand that there are many different factors at play, and just because we see some sort of connection, it doesn't mean that it's the connection. It's a connection, and that's good. But yeah, there's a lot of factors at play. So understanding the principle, the context, all of that's more important than just repeating what has been said. Repeating what has been said is essential, but understanding why things were said and then applying them accordingly, that is what we gradually understand as we become more mature in Krishna consciousness.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? Okay. Seems that is it for the day. I thank you all for joining this morning. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Pranath Prabhu.
Anchakalpatarubhasya kripasindhobhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.